we've got everybody in. We're going to get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning as we start this new series. It is Make a Will Week, October 4th to October the 10th. And this year I thought as an opportunity to bring to a lot of my clients a different way of looking at life. Of course, as a notary public, I do a lot of personal planning. I do a lot of advanced care planning. So I'm looking at everything leading up to the point of death. And then obviously a will is about that. But there's just so much more, I think, to life. So I'm just going to go through a bit about me. I'm Beverly Carter. I'm a notary public. And I'm just going to skip down to the 3 PhDs in life. It's some of those PhDs that allow me to have our guests here today and to really be able to explore this series. Coming up, we have What Shade of Gray is Your Will? And that title is very purposeful. I thought that was a bit cheeky. But really, I talk to people about wills, and not everybody has one, or they don't have an up-to-date one. And so we're going to really be exploring about the reasons why you should have a will, and just sort of answering questions that people perhaps need to know or want to ask in order for them to get to be proactive and get set up with a new will. And then we've got discussions with a death doula. Like, who knew that was something? And so we've got a wonderful woman on board to talk with. And we're going to explore what that means. I'm sure a lot of us have heard about birth doulas. So we're going to learn more about what is a death doula, and we're going to talk about her experiences. Fascinating woman. We have the philosophy of death. So I have a very good friend who is a philosopher who teaches that. And we've had many wonderful conversations around really the evolution of light and dark. I guess the concept in our Judeo-Christian westernized society of how we've come with all of these preformed ideas around death. And you know, some of them are dark, and I certainly grew up with that concept. And life, those PhDs in life has really taught me a lot more, that there's more to life. So that is a fascinating discussion. And then we have Meet the Mortician. So we have Jade, who works at one of the last remaining locally owned funeral homes. He is a funeral director. So we're going to actually be talking about some practical aspects around that. So anyhow, stay tuned. If you got the newsletter, all of those are identified in the newsletter. There are also events on Facebook. So we are happy to have you join up or share it with friends or somebody else. Everything that we're doing is being recorded, so there'll be the opportunity to go back and listen or pay attention to something. Maybe you missed something or want to review it. So please stay tuned for that. So today's topic, insights from a medium. And I'm going to just talk a bit before I introduce our wonderful guest today. I'm just going to talk a bit about my own experience around this. And I've had some significant deaths in my life. Many people have, but it's around one of those in particular where I did actually have a spirit in my home. And I can really tell you, I really wasn't very comfortable with that thought. I actually had I don't tell a lot of people this, but I think it is relevant in today's conversation. I had a full-term baby that died when I was in my late 20s. And it was really one of my personal, one of the hardest experiences I went through, but I'm going to say it was also incredibly spiritual, because life opened up in a whole different way. And I was living in Toronto at the time, and in my home, this was my second child, but my first child was when the spirit first arrived. And she was only ever there while I was pregnant, and then she went away. And then she showed up again when I was in my second pregnancy, and there was a certain more intense aspect to her presence. And of course, I came to realize that she was there for me. And she actually stayed longer she stayed about an additional 6 or 7 months, and I came to terms with the fact that she was helping me through my grief. And maybe Debra and Diana have a different perspective on that, but you know, it was a very unique experience. Then I had my third child, and she was back again. And she was there, but she left at the end, and then I stopped having children. I'm good. And so I have 2 wonderful boys, both in their 20s, both doing very well. And it was really that experience that, it's not that I disbelieved before, because I've had other experiences, but that one was so clear and so evident in my life, and very foundational into personal experiences. So a couple years ago, moving forward, my son, so my son's father died about 14 years ago. And one of my sons in particular had a very, he was very challenged by the death. It was cancer, wasn't pleasant, and it was kind of strung out over quite a period of time. And you know, I always kind of knew there would be some fallout from that, and I did my best as a parent to help my boys through their grief. But he actually attended a session with Debra and Diana, who are our speakers today, and it was his visible healing that I couldn't deny, having had the ability to communicate with his father, that kind of took me to a new level, actually gave me some courage to then step into the realm and reach out to Debra and Diana and have them to my home. So that was about 1.5 years ago. And so, you know, this has all culminated in, you know, what I do, what my PhDs in life are, and what I want to be able, and many conversations with a lot of clients about some very unique experiences around spirits. Some people work in hospitals, and they are very clear that there are spirits there. These are very credible people. And so I wanted to explore this more. So I've invited Debra Doerksen and Diana Lynn, and here's a bit about them, but I just want to say I had them again to my home just over 1 year ago. I had one of my brothers died rather tragically earlier in the year, and there is nothing like it was quite amazing, and incredulous, the information that was available, and the communications that came through. And so I just want to bring this to my clients, who, if you're interested, and obviously you're here, to be able to explore this. So we are going to open up for some questions later, but I want to sort of get through and give Debra and Diana a chance to just introduce themselves, a little bit about them, and then we'll get through. I'll moderate some questions, and as you have your own questions or comments, we'll bring you in. So welcome, Debra Doerksen and Diana Lynn. You're wonderful, you're fun, and very interesting. So
it is like Debra was saying, sometimes death is taboo and people just don't talk about it. So the more we can all have these conversations, I think the better, and people can become more open to talking about it and feel safe in that environment. So thank you so much for having us.
And trying to like Diana said, you know, normalize mediumship, I think, is really critical. And so you asked about, you know, what do we call ourselves? Oftentimes in sort of the general public, I'll say that I do spiritual counseling, because that's more palpable to people than mediumship. People have a connotation in their mind about, at least I did. I used to, you know, this happened to me at 38. Out of the blue. Like, I had no religious background. I never went to see psychics or mediums. I would have been the eye roller. It was a non-topic in my life. And suddenly, out of the blue, I'm seeing and hearing spirits, and the information, images flashed at me, hearing voices. I would have thought, quite literally, that I'd gone mad had not all of the things that were being said or shown to me be true, you know? And so, so I was stuck with, well, where do I go? Who do I talk to? And I thought, well, if I reach out to a psychic or a medium, it's going to be some, turban wrapped, crystal ball, hooped earring wearing cards. My idea about what it was that I was going to step into frightened me, and I just really didn't want a part of it. So, but my journey took me to the very, and I'm not saying that those things aren't normal. They're a facet of metaphysics, not a facet certainly that we look like we belong to, but really this process of connection to spirit is a natural process, and it is a part of who we are as human beings. If we stepped into Scotland or Ireland or, places in Africa, this would be normal. Do you know what I mean? This would just be from the time you're a little kid, grandma's died and we still set a plate out for her. And, families talk about spirit and they talk about their loved ones in spirit. And here in, Western white culture, we typically do not do that. And, we're about the tangible, aren't we?
And I think Debra's trying to say we're normal.
Yeah.
We're actually just normal people,
That's
right?
Yeah.
That have tapped into this amazing capability of, connecting to those that have passed, giving, Debra talked about, using the term, spiritual counselor, spiritual medium. We also use the term evidential mediums, which means that we're giving evidence of life after life. So instead of life after death, we like to call life after life, right? Yeah. So really, our stories are different. What happened to Debra later on in life. I've been connecting with spirit since I was, 3 is my earliest memory. But of course, you try to turn it off. You don't try to explore it. First off, you're little. You don't know that it's not something other people are seeing as well. So then you grow up thinking you're not normal, right? So for me, what happened was, I have 2 boys. When my oldest one was about 3, the same age, he started seeing spirits too. So I thought, okay, this is the time I need to explore this and I need to be able to know more about it. So if this is happening to him, I can support him. And it just snowballed from there.
This is the first time I've thought of this actually in you saying that. Do you know, my mediumship cracked open 6 months before I adopted 2 young boys who also see spirit. So actually I never thought of that until you literally just described that. So it's funny, the timing of children coming to us, that are also, open and I think part of a new experience on this earth, and so, that's interesting.
It's becoming a little bit more mainstream, like many, many years ago, nobody was talking about mediums here, right? So yes, in the UK and other places, but certainly not here. So,
thanks to John Edwards, Teresa Caputo, people are seeing, televised, experiences. My mom used to listen to somebody on the radio, and so she was very taken with a gentleman in Vancouver who used to be a regular on the radio, and so there's been people out there publicly doing this, but it hasn't been part of mainstream until probably the last 10 years for sure.
Oh wow, okay. I'm going to say I can relate. I am certain my son was also seeing the spirit that we had in our house as well. It was very interesting because she was always in a particular area of the house, and one of those areas was his first bedroom when he was a baby, and he never settled. And until at about 6 months, I thought, I'm sure that's what it is. I took him out and he was fine after that, but it was just, and even some of his baby or toddler talk was trying to express he was seeing something. And because it was just so abnormal what you would hear from a regular toddler, right? And regular day-to-day stuff. So yeah.
I love that you had a birth doula in spirit. And what is so amazing to me, and I think Diana would agree too, that just by what you described there, I've got to tell you, there's a wonderful story that I was literally listening to this morning that just goes to kind of put a stamp on exactly what you're saying. You may not know this woman in life, but she's a soul who's come forward to aid you in your birth process, in bringing a new person into the world. And then, like you said, grieving the one who didn't get to have a full life. Well, the story I was listening to this morning from this gentleman, I'm trying to remember the name of the book, but he was talking about how there was a woman when he was a little child, like a ghost, you know what I mean? One that was sort of visible within the home, or that you could just sense was around in the home. And as he was a child, but later on, when he went back and bought the same house again, this woman was still around, and she would kind of come and go in spirit. Well, eventually when he went to a medium, the medium didn't bring through family. The medium brought through this woman who had been with him since he was a child. And the reason she stayed with him, not because she knew him, but because he was being abused as a child. And this woman decided to, instead of moving on into the light, she was still in a very beautiful space, but she stayed more earthbound, so that she could be close to him and protect him and take care of him and comfort him, because that's not what he was getting at home. And so at the times in his life that were more difficult, even as he was an adult, she would come closer to him when he was having a hard time. And so it's kind of like what you were describing, Beverly. Do you know what I mean? This woman would come in, and that's a story I just listened to this morning. So I think that that's really interesting, that you're sharing something very much the same.
Yeah, fascinating. So I want to sort of ask some other questions, because, and I know people will, some of my clients listening will have their own questions too, and we'll bring those up. So what happens with people at death? What do you know, and what's your experience around the spirit? Like, are there stages of the spirit? What goes on?
That's a big question.
Oh, it's a huge question. Some of which we have experience. I mean, all we've got is our experience, right? And so,
yeah, of course.
I tend to not listen to anybody who says X, Y, and Z happens after death, because we're so uniquely individual. And I think we have to be really, really careful to stay away from kind of pat answers about the afterlife, pat answers about what happens to someone when they've taken their own life, when they have been murdered, when there's a lot of really painful ways that people leave this earth. And Diana and I sit with many clients that have been to somebody who says, because your loved one committed suicide, or, took their own life, or because they were distressed in a murder, in their passing, they're in pain, or they're wandering, or they're lost. It just simply is not true. It just simply is not true. And so I think it's really, we have to just be with the individual who has passed, to talk to them about what their experience is in spirit. And I don't know about you, but for me, it has varied widely. Never has there been a time where someone was not okay, that immediately after the passing, they were okay. Some of them instantly in light, instantly transformed into an expansive soul-like experience. Some of them still very grounded, just right outside the edges of the body, still holding form of the body, but not in the body. And so I think that there are many levels of separation from our physical being to when our soul steps out of the physical being and expands into its natural state. There are many ways of experiencing that, and many different experiences for each individual person, but never separated from the source of love, or the feeling of comfort, or the feeling of peace. That has been something that's been universal and instantaneous at death.
And for a lot of my experiences with people who have passed tragically, immediately are held in this beautiful light for healing. Right? So can you imagine, right? So we're very singular in our thoughts here, but spirit is very expansive. And I always like to take the analogy of, when you turn the light on in the room, it doesn't just illuminate the beam of light, it illuminates the whole entire room. So if we can imagine spirit or soul as that beautiful expansive energy that illuminates the whole room and beyond, we are held in love, especially when we pass tragically.
Yeah. I think too, I think, Beverly, if your clients have pen and paper, or you have this recorded, you can write this down. There's a woman named Jill Bolt Taylor, and she's a neuroanatomist, and she wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight. And there's a little YouTube TED talk that you can listen to of hers. So she's the brain scientist, right? She has a massive brain bleed and leaves the body. So she has an experience of her soul self separated from the physical self, which is not something she had ever explored or had ideas about before. One of the things that she talks about is when she realizes that she has to continue to live, she can't figure out how she's going to fit herself back down into such a tiny frame as the body that she was separated from. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because I think that it's a great thing to listen to, that little TED talk. But the other thing is that Diana and I deal a lot with people that have passed or are currently in an Alzheimer's or dementia state. Now, our souls can communicate, can move in and out of the body, even while we live. And so oftentimes, Diana and I will have a soul that is communicating, and the person will say, well, they're not dead. And we'll go, well, then they've got Alzheimer's or dementia. And they're like, yes, they do, because the soul is not restricted or constricted within the body solely anymore. And some would argue that we're never in that state. I don't believe that we are. I think that we're expansive beings, and that our human physical experience is a little narrowed experience for a short period of time. So there's so much more to us, and so much more we can communicate to, when we're talking about the realm of spirit.
Almost like that concept of the vessel. I mean, it's very biblical, right? But the body is the vessel, and it's like fascinating. So are there common, so tell me about when you sit with somebody or a group of people, how do you approach that? What happens in your world that obviously you see and you hear things, but tell me more about how you approach this and what people would expect if they were sitting with you.
You're talking about our chatter on the way to a group.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when Debra and I work together, it's such a unique experience every time, right? No session is ever the same, of course, right? But when we're getting ready, let's say we're going to go to a group reading and we're going to physically go to someone's place. It's quite funny, actually, because we could be driving somewhere and Debra and I are having this banter back and forth going, okay, who's here? And oftentimes we have like spirit sitting in the back seat going, yeah, we're coming, we're on our way. And they're communicating before we even get to wherever we're going. So it's a wonderful experience for us, right? Oftentimes, I think if we give ourselves the opportunity to be aware of spirit in all of the senses. So oftentimes information can come, we could hear things, we can see things, we can feel things physically, emotionally, we can smell things. Sometimes you'll get a waft of something and go like, oh, like, wow, that's a, really like horrible cigar smell, right? Whatever it is. Or sometimes we can taste things. So if we leave ourselves open to the possibilities of getting information in all those ways, there's much more information to relay.
So when someone comes to sit, Diana and I are tuning in, even if we work individually and together. So, a good hour beforehand, sometimes I wake up in the morning and spirit's already talking to me about, the people that are coming. That happens quite often, sometimes even the day before, but usually about an hour before somebody's coming, I'm turning on, consciously saying to them, okay, I'm ready. You can bring forward any thoughts, feelings, allow me to feel you step into the room. And it's like an invitation. It's an opening of that door to say, your loved one is coming. And usually I'll have maybe sometimes a half page of stuff, written before somebody gets there, of just what, you know, the spirit has already been sort of chatting about or bringing through. And sometimes none. Sometimes it's 5 minutes before, I haven't heard anything from spirit at all. And, you know, they come walking in the door, and I just trust. I know that if I'm patient and quiet, they're going to arrive. We can't control, of course, who comes through. And sometimes we can't, I mean, 99.9% of the time, you're going to hear from who you want to hear from. I mean, that just is, you know, I don't know why it would happen any other way. Do you know what I mean? They know that you're here. They know that we can reach into that world and create that bridge or make that connection. But I've had some pretty tough things happen. Diana laughs, you know, where I sat with a gentleman, came from Kelowna, really lovely man. And he was very open. And for 2 hours, I sat with him. And I had 2 full pages of stuff written. Nothing he understood. I mean, nothing. The Johnsons, the clock that was taken in from the grandmother that was literally taken in to be fixed. I mean, it went on and on. I said to him, I don't know what's happening. This is not normal in any way. The next day, I was heading out to Diana's. We were going to do a group reading at her place with a woman. And as I'm driving out there, there was a motorcycle that was quite a ways ahead of me, was pulling into traffic. And the whole way, I was terrified that this motorcycle in front of me was going to crash. And I kept going, okay, Debra, I was preparing in my head to tend to this event that was going to occur, that I felt was going to occur. But Diana's turnoff came, the motorcycle went ahead, and I was no longer seeing the motorcycle. And I thought, what's going on? Well, we get to Diana's place. We sit with the woman, and Diana opens up and she starts talking. And now Diana's saying the things that I have written on my page at home. Well, it turns out that this woman's husband had died only 2 weeks prior in a motorcycle accident on his way home. And not only that, he had held my attention the day before, and every single thing I had written on those 2 pages were all her. The Johnsons, she had just taken her mother's clock in to be fixed. All of it was there. All I can think, frustrating experience for me, but all I can think is that this gentleman who'd only died 2 weeks earlier was going, lady, you're seeing my wife tomorrow. You're not going to hear anybody else but me until you get to her. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. That was a very exceptional experience for her and for him, a very, very early tragic loss. And so I don't blame him for holding my attention for that period of time.
Do spirits retain some of their earthly flavor or characteristics, personality? Like, how do you find?
Just tell the story about the 2 gentlemen came through.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, I mean, well, I guess I'll reword that in a way of, you know, when we pass, you know, I think that is a very earthly or human experience of who we are and our personalities, right? But they have to bring that personality through so you understand and recognize who they are, right? Yeah. So yes, they're going to come through with that information. Debra and I were in White Rock. And we were doing readings all day and teaching. And so Debra and I were sitting there. This wonderful lady comes in and she sits down. And I believe it was Debra was connected to her dad, right? And all of a sudden, I just was laughing and I was like joking with Debra and like, you know, like bumping her and stuff.
Very unlike Diana. It was like her personality changed.
And the woman's looking at us like I think she kind of was figuring out what was going on, yet she didn't want to actually admit that she knew what was going on. Well, oh my goodness, this was her husband's best friend.
No, her dad's.
Or her dad, sorry, her dad's best friend who had just recently passed, and they were back and forth behaving exactly the way that they were behaving when they both lived.
Her dad communicating through me, his best friend communicating through Diana, and the back and forth. I mean, it was hysterical. There were 5 of us in the room. There was me and Diana and her, and the dad and the friend, and it was just a wonderful reliving of and a demonstration of the nature of them still connecting to one another in spirit. I mean, it was beautiful, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. But like Diana said, I mean, how else can they identify, do you know what I mean, that it's them? Are they still the same person? Not entirely. I don't believe so. I believe when we step out of the human form, we lose a lot of things. We lose the ego, we lose the fear, we lose the judgments, the beliefs, we lose all of the constructs of that, and we're in a much more beautiful, open state than we are when we're in the physical incarnation. But again, like, Diana said, how can we know that it's them? I remember there was a gentleman that came through, and it was very early on in my mediumship, and it was the first time I got scared. He became very violent in spirit. And I immediately was like, okay, see, this is why I don't want to do this. Do you know what I mean? Like I kind of had an internal freak out, not with the woman, but inside I was bothered. And a couple of minutes in, I decided, okay, well, I can't pull away from this. I have to figure out what to do. So I asked a spirit guide for help. And it was beautiful because this gentleman named Eric, who has been one of my guides, he stepped in at that moment. He put his hand out to me and he said, Debra, it's just information. It's just information. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I pulled back again and I went back to the spirit and I said, okay, you're showing me something. And sure enough, this father had been a very violent father. And so there was no way that his daughter in front of me was going to recognize that it was him if I said that this man whose father is coming through in love is coming through. Do you know what I mean? That she'd go, well, that's not my dad. Do you know what I mean? But I could demonstrate by showing her the kinds of things that he was showing me that in fact it was him. Then he was able to move into how he had changed in his death, what was different for him, and his reflections on why he had been a violent man in this life. He was terribly abused as a child. Do you know what I mean? So the story begins to unfold when we can hear, and that's where, quite frankly, if you ever hear from a medium that a spirit is angry, walk away. Because it just simply is not what's happening. And so that's a human element. It's not a spirit element. So your dad, your uncle, your brother, your mother, they're not angry, right? So they don't have those constructs there. Yes, are they emotional? For sure, but they're not going to come through being angry. If they're demonstrating that, that's a misrepresentation on this, just the example that I gave you. Do you know what I mean? We need to know enough to go, this spirit is showing me something that's identifiable, and that's what they're offering, but it's not their current state now. Does that make sense?
I just have somebody having a comment here about audio. Does anybody else have issues with, I can hear you just fine. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Is it hard to hear us?
Not from my perspective.
People are shaking their head, and I believe one of your people I know.
Oh, okay.
There's the wave.
Just looking at you. I'm not looking at anybody. It's better now. Okay. Okay. So that's good. So, so when obviously as a notary, I said I'm doing wills, and people are putting in, identifying what their, kind of like their last wishes are around what happens, celebration of life. Do you get any feedback from spirits about, hey, or do people want to know what, did I do a good job? Did I do the right send off? Or did I respect your wishes around distributing items? Do you hear any of that sort of thing?
Yeah, all the time, actually, for me anyways. It's one of the, I would say at least 50% of the people that I see want to know if their loved ones saw, what they did for them, and then they want to know if they did the right thing for their loved ones, right? So this wonderful story, this gentleman came to me for a reading in his 80s. So this beautiful elderly gentleman comes in, he sits down, you can tell he's a little bit nervous, right? Well, his wife in spirit just went on about the beautiful way that he honored her after his passing. So she started to talk about there's this file box. It looks like this. And there's a picture of me here. There's, this paperwork here. There's a napkin here from our wedding. There's a this and this and this and this. And he just was like, oh my God, she does know what I did for her after. Mm-hmm. He went to his car. He had brought the file box with him to the reading, but left it in the car, right? So he brings it out. Now he is the most proudest man going, yeah, this is what I did for her. This is what I did for her. So it's funny that, but it's us here that need to know, right? Mm-hmm. It's not them. So really, if we get down to it on the other side, it's not about what we did for them. It's not what we bought, as in like a headstone. It's not. It's really about us and our healing, mm-hmm. and what we can do in that process.
And if we can't follow through on some things, or we're not able to follow through on some things that we know were their wishes, please do not worry. I have just the most stunning experience where this mother and daughter had come to see me, and this father was coming through so beautifully, and he described his house to me, and then he said, Debra, walk up the stairs. So I said, okay. So I walked up the stairs, and he said, if you go to the left, over against the far wall is the fireplace. And then he showed me this beautiful blue vase that was sitting up on top of the fireplace. And he stood beside the fireplace and he went, really? Like this? And I'm like, I don't know. He's going, really? But he's pointing to this beautiful blue vase. Well, the mother and daughter lost it because he had wanted to be buried and they had cremated him instead. And that was his cremation, was in this blue vase that was sitting on the fireplace. And he's going, really? Like, I wanted to be buried and you cremated me. But it was humorful and it was wonderful. He wasn't angry and upset. Do you know what I mean? That they hadn't followed through on his wishes. So, I don't ever believe that the soul, once it's on the other side, actually cares what you end up doing. Do you know what I mean? But they do bring it up a lot. I was put beside this huge tree, or I was taken into the forest, or they let my ashes go in the water. And it's not that they care what you've done. It's that they want to let you know that I was there while you were doing it.
People, you're in the session, and do people always get the answers that they want? Or, so people will want to hear a certain outcome to an answer, or maybe it's not available at that time. Maybe it takes some time, or different sessions, or different mood. I think this speaks about expectations. If I'm coming to see you, I know personally when I just kept my mind very open. I had no idea what to expect, and I was very pleasantly surprised. But I don't feel like I need answers to any particular past events or difficult deaths, right? I've worked through that. But I was open to just, hey, who shows up for the party? So what do you find can be a bit of a stumbling block or a challenge for some people, or how should they approach seeing you?
Well, know that Debra and I both know that as you're driving to our place, that you're thinking about your loved ones, and you're going, okay, if they bring up, the key that I have to their Jaguar, I'll know it's them. Right? So that's great. And that's what, when you talk about having expectations from spirit, right? We don't have any control over that. And what Debra and I have to let go of are those things that we think we want to hear, as opposed to spirit knows what we need to hear in that moment.
Mm-hmm. It's also what they want to communicate, I guess, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and we can't treat, and this is the thing that I think as you do this, or you have the experience, you begin to see, we can't treat it like it's a game. Do you know what I mean? It's a game of proof. Just like if they were still here, you know how in relationships, you sometimes 5, maybe 10 years in, discover how somebody you love or are very close to feels about something that you never knew. And so if you're saying, I'll know it's dad if, you know, like Diana said, he says the key to the Jaguar. But when dad comes through, he starts describing the hand carved thermometer that he did that's inside the right hand side of the kitchen door. Well, dad doesn't care about the key to the Jag. What dad cares about is the thermometer that he spent carving that has sat inside that kitchen doorway for 40 years, right? So that's why sort of welcoming them forward, but not anchoring to a specific, will allow so many more things to be available to you, because you're only narrowing your mind when there could be a multitude of other things that are even more demonstratable about life after life than what you just have your own mind set on.
So we've had a lot of chat, and at this point I do want to sort of open it up to some of my clients to be able to ask questions. There is one that came early on in the chat group, and I'll just read that out. If people want to unmute, or we'll kind of go in turns, unmute and do a video of just sort of moderate that. So my daughter's dad died when she was a baby. He is now 30 and quite affected by the loss of him and not having been able to know him. What kind of a direction might you or guidance might you offer to her?
Yeah, I think that everybody. So she was saying that there's a woman here whose daughter's father passed when she was very young, and she's still very impacted by it. I think, you know, one of the things is everybody really has to have their own experience, and whether that's through a medium or they have their own signs and symbols that they know that it's a loved one. I think encouraging your daughter to open up herself to the signs and symbols that dad clearly have been trying to give her as time's gone on. I just keep having this T drawn in front of me. It just keeps going T. So I don't know if that's him trying to communicate or if that person understands the T, but it just keeps getting drawn in front of me since you asked the question. But you know, so encouraging them to open up spiritually to their own signs and symbols, if they're not going to actually seek a medium, then that can be helpful, because again, like, they're opening the door to say, okay, I'm ready and willing to have, you know, communication from my dad. And then you've got to trust your gut. Do you know what I mean? If it's a feather, if it's a dime, if it's in the clouds, if it's a certain song played on the radio, you know, I think that yeah, you know, just encouragement to be open spiritually will help create a gateway.
Yeah, because I can see the disconnect, and having been through that, my kids were a little older, but I definitely, all I can say is the visible healing of my son, at, you know, even to the point of using his nickname that you would not have. I mean, that was very distinct. So
it's been absolutely fascinating. I've always kind of been interested in this and wondered if it's something, is it just a natural talent that people come with? I know you said it happened to you later in life, or is this something you can actually develop with the certain practices?
Absolutely. And Diana and I have been running development groups, classes of all different shapes and sizes for the last 5 years at least. We do some independently, we do lots together. We have some things coming up that are just wonderful. We're actually doing an online 2-day retreat. I think it's the 17th and 18th of October, and where we're connecting to angelic realm, where we're connecting to loved ones in spirit, where we're connecting to our own soul self. It is our nature. So this human aspect is a temporary stop along the road. It's teaching us, it's like school, and it's teaching us a whole lot of things. It's giving us opportunity to learn a whole lot of things, but it's not the who we are. The who we are is so much broader, so much grander. And so why shouldn't we be learning to connect to the wholeness of who we are, that is having the narrowed experience of you being Carolyn, or me being Debra, or this being Diana. So yeah, it's available to all of us. Diana has said before, you know, it's like learning to paint, right?
Yeah, or even, you know, you hear about these children who pick up even a violin, right? And they just know how to play. right? So that's something that, yeah, that's a natural ability, wherever that comes from, right? But it doesn't mean that the next child can't pick it up and take lessons and learn how to do it just the same way, right? So again, we're all open to it. But Deborah and I do it every single day, right?
Yeah.
So it's in the doing of it.
Yes, of course.
Right? Just like anything else.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, and a wonderful one, and people are so surprised. Like every 2 weeks I do these angel guide and deity nights where it's 2 hours and spirits come forward, and I don't tell people who's come forward, but I help people open up to sensing what's in the air around them, and how their body and their minds are responding to that energy, and then I bring forward the energy, and it's amazing how many things came through to you when you discover who it was that was present with you, like Mahatma Gandhi or Archangel Michael or any of these wonderful ancient Egyptian figures, beautiful angelic guides, and it's quite amazing how people who have never done it before go, oh my God, I felt that, I saw that, I connected to that. It's it's wonderful to know what we're surrounded by in spirit,
Yeah. Sure.
Great
Thank you.
question, Carolyn.
Mhm.
Thank you. Mhm.
There is a chat.
I have a question. Do you find doing this mediumship draining? Like, can you turn it off? Like, does it sap your energy?
Yeah. A lot of times Deborah and I get very exhilarated by the connection with spirit, right? So I would think for me, the only part that's draining perhaps is maybe the afterthought, because when we're connecting to spirit and when we're sitting across from someone and really engaged in that, our own thoughts are out of the way. It's the connection with spirit, right? So I often after a session will go like, oh wow, like that, oh my goodness, and then like my own personal feelings and thoughts come in, and perhaps that's the only time when I would feel a little bit sort of tired,
Right.
is from my own thoughts and emotions, but certainly not from spirit at all.
It's more like I compare it to like sticking the plug in the wall and just get just supercharged. So it's an amping up, and so yeah, maybe there's a letdown after.
Right.
I don't know, but fatigue isn't something that I've experienced, or Diana and I've talked about this lots of times. It's hunger.
Oh,
We're really hungry. That's what I blame my size on, is spirit.
Well, you know what? I've seen some mediumship shows, and I see people, that have this gift approach people just randomly, like in a supermarket. Oh, someone is just begging me to talk to you. So is this something you can turn off, or do you meet people, you go, oh my God, I just got to tell this person something?
I would never do that.
Yeah.
Do that. It's, you don't know where the human, it's fine, you have the connection to spirit, but you have no idea where that person is at in their life. You have no idea what day or what moment they're in. And I think, I always say, some people say, well, what if the spirit's really trying and it could be helpful and interventional? I said, well, then the spirit will find a different way to do that, because my philosophy is do no harm. And to the greatest degree possible, that is what I keep in mind, that where these are sensitive topics,
and it's,
so you can check.
It's about respect too, right?
Yeah.
And I like to give spirit the opportunity to really say what they want to say, and have the person who's sitting there being able to respond or release or let go of some of the things that maybe they're holding on to, that's not allowing them to get through maybe the grieving process. You can't do that in the supermarket.
No,
No,
that's right.
Right.
and also too, spirit isn't just talking to us, they're talking to their loved ones too. So I've been in many situations where spirit has been predominant, and I've said, listen, if this is that important to you, then you get them to come to me. and you get them to come into the same aisle as me and start up a conversation. Do you know what I mean? There's going to be some other way that you work this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I put it back to the spirit for sure.
I just wasn't sure if you could turn it off.
Yeah, you can, I mean, turn it off to probably 80% maybe. It's kind of always there. Again, it's our nature, but we're not inundated with chatter.
No,
Oh,
and
okay.
there's boundaries too, right?
Yeah.
So oftentimes we forget. We can talk to spirit. We can have a conversation where, you know what, in my bedroom at 2:00 in the morning is not the right time. Right?
Yeah.
But then we have to offer something. So we offer them, okay, how about tomorrow morning at 9:00? I'll sit for a moment and we'll connect. Right?
And I also say to people, and Diana and I've said this many times before in our teaching, that if you're learning to develop your skills, do not cross boundaries. I wouldn't walk up to your living room window, put my hands on the glass like this, and start watching what was going on inside. So we shouldn't do that spiritually either if we're developing. So we always ask permission. If is it all right, if I tune into blah, 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 right? So I think permission is important. Yeah. Great question.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else who wants? We're running into the last several minutes, so I just make one last question.
Just know that you can't make a mistake. I mean, especially if you're dealing with, Beverly here and you're her client and you're wrapping up sort of loose ends with family, do what feels right to you. Your loved one, but follow your heart and don't worry if certain things don't go as planned. Everything will turn out exactly as it's meant to be. And even if you're disappointed by some things, it's okay. Everything will resolve itself exactly as it needs to.
Couple chat. Mel just said, I want to say thank you to me. Thank you for showing up. Appreciate that. And Diana, this has been great.
Yeah.
And Lisa, thank you for your time today. And I too want to thank you very much. I hope this has been an exploration of my clients and an introduction as well. And it meets in with things that have happened in my life and I'm still inspired to do myself. But you've got Facebook. So we've got info@DebraDoerksen.com and inquiry at diana-lynn.com. But I think I find if you just search for Debra Doerksen, you'll find them both. And you've got a website and also Facebook. Any final words of wisdom or insight?
Just know that your link to your loved one is exactly that. It's love. That's the place that we work from. It is what they exist in. Everybody is okay. Everyone is being loved and held and having their own unique experiences. And our connection to them is love based. That is the fabric and the fiber of what it is, creating that link, for us to connect and communicate.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
We are in love with what we do.
Yeah.
Very passionate about it, and we're very grateful. And thank you very much for having us on here.
Wonderful, brave thing to do, Beverly. I think it was fantastic. Yeah.
I'd like to do it. So.
And thank all of you for taking the risk and coming and being open to the conversation. I think that's beautiful. And hi, Mel. Lovely to see your face.
Comment, love is eternal. So, and I just want to wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving. Keep safe, keep calm, be kind, all that good stuff. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to send you out. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Girls are up to date.